welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something really fascinating. We're going to deconstruct a true global superpower, to find the actual engine behind America's military might. And honestly, rather than just skimming the surface, throwing around defense budgets or troop numbers, we're going to trace exactly how the world's most complex military system was built from the ground up. We'll explore its roots, its pretty astonishing historical rise, and perhaps most importantly, the invisible architecture that actually sustains it today. It's an incredible story of industry, geography, and strategy, so let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Global Military Behemoth and Modern Capabilities.
When we look at this system globally, we are talking about a scale of operations that is almost difficult to wrap your head around. Imagine a nation operating hundreds of military bases spread across nearly every continent on Earth. We're talking about aircraft carriers that are essentially floating cities, vessels weighing over 100,000 tons, carrying upwards of 5,000 personnel. They are literally larger and more heavily armed than the entire naval fleets of many other countries. Add in stealth bombers specifically designed to take off from the American Midwest, fly across entire oceans completely undetected by radar, deliver a payload, and return home in a single mission. Combine all of that with tech capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away with absolute pinpoint accuracy. The sheer, unprecedented scale of these assets creates this visceral sense of awe, right? It really establishes a baseline for what modern deterrence looks like.
Now, seeing all of that naturally raises a pretty fundamental question. Why does America remain the world's most powerful military nation? It's incredibly tempting to just point to a massive spreadsheet and say, well, it's entirely about having a larger defense budget, or to assume they just build bigger and louder weapons. But actually, scratch that, because it misses the real story completely. America's strength comes from a deeply interconnected ecosystem. It's decades of planning, domestic innovation, and strategic alliances. It's this remarkably complex network built methodically over more than a century.
To really grasp how this network functions, we have to look back to a time when it didn't exist at all. Section 2. From Colonies to Superpower. The Humble Beginnings.
The contrast here is absolutely staggering. Today, obviously, we see a sprawling, technologically advanced global superpower capable of reaching any corner of the Earth. But back in 1776, the reality was just 13 small, fiercely independent colonies. They had absolutely no massive standing army, they had no advanced navy to speak of. In fact, they often resorted to outfitting private merchant ships with cannons just to harass enemy supply lines. They had highly limited resources and struggled immensely just to defend their own immediate borders. At the very beginning, they depended heavily on local militias, borrowed gunpowder, and honestly, sheer determination rather than actual military might. It is a total narrative whiplash when you compare those under-resourced, fragile origins to the modern behemoth we see today.
So how exactly did that underdog become a global titan? That brings us to Section 3, the 20th century shift, the engine of change.
While 1776 was the starting line, the true pivot, the moment the trajectory changed forever, happens in the early to mid-20th century. As Europe was tragically devastated by two horrific world wars, with centuries-old infrastructure just turned to rubble, the United States found itself in a vastly different geographically protected position. It was rapidly expanding its domestic industries at breakneck speed. Because its homeland factories remained entirely unscathed by enemy bombing, it became the undisputed arsenal of democracy. By the time the post-World War II era arrived, America didn't just emerge as a military victor, it emerged as the unrivaled leader of the Western world, backed by an industrial capacity that no other nation could even begin to match.
This is absolutely crucial to understand. This military rise wasn't just powered by success on the battlefield, it was fueled by a massive, unprecedented economic explosion right at home. The U.S. relentlessly expanded its industries, developed cutting-edge tech, and built one of history's strongest economies. To put that scale into perspective for you, during peak wartime production, factories like Ford's Willow Run were turning out a heavy bomber aircraft every 60 minutes, every single hour. That is a mind-blowing level of output. Factories, domestic innovation, and private technological development became the literal gears turning the military machine. It proved once for all that you cannot build a global military without first building a global economy.
Which brings us to a fascinating evolution of how that power is actually wielded today. Section 4. Beyond the weapons, the modern network.
When you trace this evolution, you quickly realize that the physical arsenal, the tangible hardware like nuclear submarines, stealth aircraft, cyber capabilities, and military satellites, is actually only half the equation. These physical items are completely intertwined with and fully dependent on strategic assets. We're talking about global alliances, deep intelligence networks, worldwide strategic locations, and economic partnerships. Think about it. You can have all the stealth aircraft in the world, but without strategically located partner bases to refuel them and deep intelligence networks to tell them where to go, those physical assets are severely limited. The hardware is basically useless without the global software of diplomacy and geography holding the whole shebang together.
And this entire network, it's built for one highly specific strategic purpose: power projection. This isn't just a defensive shield meant to protect domestic territory, it acts as a spear. Power projection is a defense system specifically designed to exert influence far beyond its own borders. It is the logistical capability to deploy thousands of troops, heavy armor, and air support anywhere on Earth within a matter of days. It leverages all of those global alliances, strategically located bases, and refueling technologies to shape global events from thousands of miles away.
But we do have to ground ourselves in a fundamental reality here. Military strength alone does not guarantee victory. History constantly reminds us of this fact. We have seen time and time again, from asymmetric conflicts and insurgencies to shifting global paradigms, that even the absolute strongest nations face monumental, sometimes insurmountable challenges. Massive hardware and power projection simply do not guarantee a win against changing political realities on the ground.
Because of that unpredictability, the true pillars of American influence aren't just missiles, submarines, and tanks. A powerful, resilient economy, relentless technological leadership in sectors like AI and aerospace, robust global diplomacy, and the calculated decisions made on the world stage, these are the real secret sauce of American hegemony. These four foundations are what actually allow the military to adapt to a changing world. The physical military is ultimately just the visible, sharp edge of a much larger, invisible national machine.
So, what comes next for this century-in-the-making system? Section 5. Challenges of the Future. Looking ahead. We've seen how a nation that began as 13 under-resourced colonies transformed into the world's leading military power through this incredibly complex web of industry, technology, and diplomacy. But the world is rapidly changing once again. So, I'll leave you with this to think about. What challenges will shape its future in the decades ahead? Will the true test be shifting global economies, entirely new realms of artificial intelligence and space-based technology, or perhaps fracturing international alliances that have stood for decades? It's a fascinating question to ponder as history continues to unfold in real time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep seeking out the invisible structures behind our incredibly complex world.